Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're going to be unboxing Cadia Stands, the new Imperial Guard starter set, or limited edition starter set for Warhammer 40k. Now for those of you who don't know, Warhammer 40k is a game by Games Workshop. It's a tabletop miniatures game in which mad, crazy wars are fought all over the galaxy. It's normally populated with things like superhumans like Space Marines, or Chaos Space Marines, or monsters like Tyranids, or monsters like Orcs. But in the midst of all this craziness, there is also the ordinary human soldier. Now, the most famous of which are known as the Cadians. Now, it's a very exciting thing for Warhammer fans, of which I am one of them, because it's the first kind of range refresh that the Imperial Guard have had, I'd say, close to 15, 16 years. I had a look at some of the sprues for some of the traditional guardsmen prior to this, and it had a date of 2006 on it. There's a kind of a Sentinel Walker in here, and that sprue had a date of 2008 on it. So this is a very exciting time for a lot of Warhammer fans, because the Imperial Guard, which to its credit is kind of the workhorse of the future Imperium of Man, is finally getting a range refresh, and one that looks very good and very exciting. Cadia was a planet that was kind of a bulwark against the bad guys of the universe, but the planet blew up. However, the planet in this context was basically, it produced one thing, which was soldiers. So there was like billions and billions of Cadian soldiers out there serving off planet. So what makes the kind of the background story for these soldiers quite nice is that their home planet is gone. They will be the last Cadians, so they have nothing left really to live for except duty. And I love the name of the box set in the sense that Cadia stands, in that there's still a touch of defiance by these soldiers against the horrible, cruel fate that has befallen their home world. The box set itself is absolutely gorgeous. It comes with a whole heap of things. It comes with effectively 2 squads or 2 sections of soldiers. It comes with a kind of a command squad. It has a Sentinel. You know, this thing has this is the one that's been updated since 2008. It also comes with 2 kind of ordnance teams, kind of a howitzer and a kind of field artillery. It also comes with a limited edition kind of Imperial Guard Codex. Now, this book will be released again later on, I think next year. But nevertheless, that there is a kind of a limited edition change cover here, which is a nice thing for this box set. It also comes with data cards and the usual kind of transfer sheet. But nevertheless, it is an absolutely gorgeous box. Now, one thing I will say is the sticker here, don't try and remove it, because it will kind of tear the picture here. It will kind of tear the box. If you're someone who wants to kind of keep the box in pristine condition, because to me this is a beautiful box set, just make sure you snip it rather than try and pull it. Now, the sleeve comes off, so the sleeve itself is really nice, and you have a lovely symbol here of the Cadian flag, and you have kind of, again, the Imperial Guard and another kind of Astra Militarum signal here. So Games Workshop, to its credit, has done a lovely job in this box. Now, this was as far as I've actually unboxed. The rest of it is now going to be all brand new to me, so I'm just going to open it here as gently as I can, because the box is something I definitely want to keep, as it's a noteworthy collector's edition. Not that I'd be selling it on or anything like that, but it's a nice thing to have. So, pulling out the lid for the very first time, carefully. Now, I'm just caught on a little bit of sprue, so I'm not going to force it, because that would be silly. We have here all the goodies in the box. Now, of course, it looks like Sprue City, but you do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a half sprues. Now, this is obviously the ordnance set, but we'll have a closer look at that in a minute. And we have, of course, the cover. Now, this is quite nice, but it's always damaged because it has one specific purpose, which is to kind of protect the things underneath. So this is the new kind of Lord General of the Astra Militarum, which is basically, this is a robotic horse. It's kind of a mad aesthetic choice to have what could at first glance look like a normal horse, but is actually a futuristic army with a man on top of a robotic horse and a power sword. And he's a very kind of Age of Sigmar kind of look to him, which is the fantasy version of this game. But nevertheless, the other side, of course, has... These are other very famous Imperial Guardsmen. They're called the Cadia Jungle Fighters. So maybe this is a hint to the future in that other Imperial Guard regiments, famous ones, will be kind of re-released and put out so we can all see. Now, as you can see, this guy is fighting a bloodletter, kind of a nasty, horrible chaos demon. We have here the book, which is something I am very much looking forward to getting my teeth into. So it's a nice, big, thick book. We have here these are the bases, of course, possibly for the Ordnance team and, of course, for the Sentinel. We have other mini bases here, nice small ones, but of course they're Imperial Guardsmen. We have the Cadian transfer sheet, so we'll just zoom in. I think it's going to be the usual standard one. So, of course, everything is white. So the kind of the standard palette template for these, of course, is a dark green. So these would stand out all the better. You have some interesting symbology here, which will go on top of the heavily ordnance symbols. And you have, of course, something that's kind of very Vietnam War era-esque in the sense that you would see kind of playing cards or symbols like that put on various soldiers. You have Cadia written here in various sizes. You have different numbers. So if you want to be a specific regiment, it gives you the freedom to do so. And it has different regiment numbers going from 317 up to 280. And you have the same thing here in black. So there's a nice little bit of customizable aspects here in the transfer sheet. The data cards themselves, I'm actually looking forward to opening. So I'll just have a quick open of these. And we'll see what sort of data cards we have inside. Now, it'll probably be the usual assortment of data cards. But what I like about data cards is it's a kind of an objective... It really helps for objective-based games, which is something that the Imperial Guard would be very good at. Because, if anything, there's so many of them that they will be able to take and hold objectives. So even though they're getting slaughtered by much more powerful units, if you can hold those objectives for long enough, you might win the game. So you have Battle Tactic Stratagems, Vengeance for Cadia, which, as I said, is their planet, which is now gone. You have Cadia Stands, so that's a kind of again, defiance, and it's just something I kind of like, almost like the Ukrainians and their courage. You have Ingrained Precision, you have Overlapping Fields of Fire, Volley Fire, Experienced Eye, Immovable Indoctrination, Relentless, Field Promotion. Now that seems interesting because this is called an Epic Deed Stratagem. So should a force's senior officers be slain, it will fall to a junior officer to see victory forged with unwavering adherence to the battle plan. Use this stratagem when an Astra Militarum warlord from your army is destroyed. Select one officer model from your army that does not have a warlord trait, then select a warlord trait that no model from your army has, and that selected model is eligible for. Now that's very interesting because, you know, field promotion, it allows you to kind of to retain and even shake up your stratagem or tactics a little bit. So that would be very interesting. You've got Vengeful Salute, Battlefield Surgery, I don't even want to read that. You have Crushed Them, you have Fire in My Position, Officer Cadre, Battlefield Bequest, Imperial Commander's Armory, Orbital Interference, Maverick Maneuvers, Thunderous Charge, Artillery Strike Requested. Now these are famous for the Imperial Guard because one thing they are good at is calling in artillery from off-table positions. You have Acceptable Losses, which is another thing the Imperial Guard are famous for, which is basically, it's similar to a meat grinder that they just throw piles and piles and piles of human beings at it until they actually get it. You have Vicious Traps, Fainting Strike, Flak Barrage, Shield of Flesh. So again, as I was saying earlier on about basically they throw people into the meat grinder. You have Mount Up, which is interesting. So the Mechanized or Militarum Tempest Infantry Unit. So there are various... the Imperial Guard is a very varied thing. So you would have... the Cadians would be the kind of the basic template. But the Mechanized or Militarum Tempest Infantry Unit would be akin to modern mobile cavalry. They'd be a very kind of mobile fast strike unit. So that's interesting. That it's good that you can use all the various branches of the Imperial Guard in your singular army, and that's apparently one thing that's going to be up in the Codex. Overcharged las cells, which is very interesting. If you read the fiction, you'll know that some of the more veteran soldiers will overcharge their las cells to give their fire rate a bit more of a kick. You have smoke launchers, ablative plating, melt-a-mine, first rank fire, second rank fire. Now that's interesting. That's very Napoleonic era Peninsular War-esque, but nevertheless it's interesting that until the end of your next shooting phase, change the type of all lasguns and hotshot lasguns models in this unit are equipped to heavy 3. So that's interesting that you kind of, despite having basic infantry, you can up their fire rate and their damage with a simple regimental order. You have take aim, fix bayonets, take cover, move, move, move. I like that. Until the end of your next movement phase. If this unit makes a normal move, add 2 inches to the move characteristics of models in this unit. You have suppression fire, forwards for the Emperor, duty and honor, get back in the fight until the start of your next command phase. This unit is eligible to shoot or charge, but not both, in a turn in which it fell back. At all costs, show them steel, show them contempt, remain vigilant, pound them to dust. These are all mechanized orders, so you have full throttle, gunners kill on sight, blitz them, shock and awe, pinning fire, and you also have some psychic disciplines here as well. So you have smite. So there are kind of what are called sanctioned psychers in the Cadian army, or in the Imperial Guard, that if you're a psychic in the Warhammer 40k universe, it's not a nice thing to be. Normally you're kind of hunted or burnt as a heretic or a witch, or fed into this kind of big grinder to keep this corpse of an emperor alive. It's hard to kind of summarize without sounding absolutely insane, but the Emperor of Mankind was brought to the brink of death, and basically they sacrifice 10,000 psychers a day to keep him alive. So that's generally what happens to most psychers. But a few, and I won't say they're lucky because it's not exactly a nice life, are brought into the Imperial Guard to actually be used as offensive weapons. So you have Smite, you have Terrifying Visions, Gaze of the Emperor, Psychic Barrier, Night Shroud, Mental Shackles, Psychic Maelstrom, and you have some core stratagems. So these are kind of the more basic ones, like Command Reroll is an interesting that if I wanted to roll a defense dice and I rolled something terrible, this gives me a chance to re-roll it again. Cut them down, Desperate Breakdown, Emergency Disembarkation, Fire Overwatch, Counter-Offensive, and of course, as apt, you end with Insane Bravery for the Imperial Guard. So those were the actual the cards. The background of themselves is also quite nice. So this was a nice thing to kind of get in a starter set, because most of the combat patrols starter sets for Warhammer have always just kind of included the models and a kind of a how to make kit. They've only recently gotten into the habit of kind of giving you things that allows you to play the game with. So I'm very happy to see something like this. We'll have a look at the sprues. So the first thing we'll look at, of course, we'll look at the artillery barrage pieces. So as you can see here, you've got a proper kind of flak gun, and you have, I think these are the kind of howitzer chambers for it. You have extra bits and pieces of ordnance. You have here the shield. You have, what's nice about it is that, of course, it's something that's kind of attached to a trailer, so it has the classic field gun kind of feel to it. You have here what looks like to be boxes of ammunition. You have spinning wheels, which is pretty cool, so you can kind of rearrange it. You have a las cannon version, so this would be more like the classical kind of cannon shell piece. This one would be more kind of powerful one that would fire a laser. You have a much larger shield, and you have extra bits and pieces of ordnance on it. So you also have the tires here. So this is one specific kind of piece. This one is interesting because here we have the Cadian flag. Now this one was interesting because I was tempted that if it was just a blank structure to maybe put something like an Irish flag there or something just to kind of, I don't know, make my own imprint with this army. But if you were curious about it, which I was, it does have the Cadian army here. Now in one sense, if you want to be true to the lore, that's a good thing, because the hard part is you don't have to free paint, as the model work is there for you. But if you wanted to kind of replace it with your own flag or make a new flag, I'm sure you can shave it down or anything like that. Now of course we have plenty of other bits and pieces here, so I won't go into massive detail, but I will pick out what looks to be interesting. So what is interesting here for me now is the heads. Now you also have female Imperial Guardswomen, which is good because it does get boring painting the same kind of miniature over and over again, but it also allows you to personalize your army a little bit more. I mean, I served with plenty of very brave women, and it's good to see that this is becoming more and more common in miniatures. You have a fella here, I think, is he smoking a cigar? He is. So you have a kind of a sergeant cigar smoker here, of course. How could you not have that archetype? You have some very interesting weapons here. So you've got a plasma rifle. You have a very interesting chest rig here, including the armor and with kind of basic ordnance holding off on them. You have, of course, the nice classic Imperial Guard look is still there with kind of a touch of a World War II ankle strap, which is kind of put onto it, which was... It's kind of old school kind of army, but nevertheless, it's kind of really cool to see it. You have here Flamer, what's it called? For flamethrower, of course, the backpack for it. You have other very interesting ordnance here. So, I mean, there's great details in this. So you have different series of arms here. You have what is a las pistol, I presume, for the officers, or maybe some of the NCOs. You have here, which I'm not sure what these are. These could be just kind of extra little sprue bits to kind of have around the place, because any kind of military would have a whole heap of bits and pieces with them to kind of make the conditions livable. You have here the sword, you have the power fist. So this, I think, belongs to one of the sergeants. So he's adorned with a power fist. You have, again, this is the back of the actual armor, so it looks really impressive. I mean, it's not just kind of a Mickey Mouse flak jacket thrown over a smock. There seems to be kind of a proper Imperial Guard kit there. You have, of course, the chain sword, and the detail in all this, lads, I have to say, is absolutely lovely. And also here we have some more interesting heads, where you have, of course, the peak cap. So if you wanted kind of the... I presume this might be for the ordnance team, in the sense that the officer would be more easily identifiable. You have cool little symbology here, like the laurel around the skull. You have very interesting things here, like, say, this now is... it's just basically a pooch, but it's just strapped up to the nines, and that's very interesting to see, because that's cool little details in terms of kind of soldiers fixing their own kit out in the field. You have another one here which is really cool. Now this is just a las weapon, but they've strapped on bits and pieces to it. So again, it's soldiers that have been out in the field a long time that have kind of added on their bits and pieces. You have here as well, of course, the classic sergeant's chevrons. You have here some of the more interesting weapons. You've got a flamer, you have a melt-a-gun, and you have what looks to be a grenade launcher, and another kind of las weapon which has, you know, is wrapped up with proper kits, and some very interesting heads here, I believe, which are helmeted. Now, I thought initially those were kind of scrimnets or balaclavas, but they're actually just something that you can place certain faces there. So it's interesting that you have at least some options with it. So that was one of the sprues. The other sprue here, of course, is, I believe, another big part of the ordnance kit here. So as you can see, this, oh no, actually, this is probably the Sentinel, thinking about it, because you have here the hip joints, and you have here a chain sword saw that's attached to it. You also have a fairly large missile. You have extra arms and bits and pieces for other Imperial Guardsmen. So it's the same thing here. Yep, it's interesting here that this guy has a kind of a tank helmet cover type of thing. You have here extra kind of stoicky armor, so maybe this is kind of a cavalry unit. You have the basic kind of ammo boxes, things like that. You have the flamethrower, the multi-melta, the plasma rifle. So this Sentinel actually has an awful lot of interesting little additions. You also have what looks like to be something akin to a 50 cal weapon. You can just strap onto it, and another thing which seems to be just a big laser fire. You have, of course, the pilot seat here. So I'm presuming that the pilots gives you a series of options, so you can make up whatever kind of build you want to put there. And this, of course, would be the main body of the actual thing, including the exhaust and other little bits and pieces, including minor exhausts. So it looks very interesting. A lot of great detail in that sprue. We have here another sprue of guardsmen. So Having a look at this, we have, again, a sandbag, which is actually very interesting. We have here, as you can see from the legs, there's a lot of kind of customizability of this. So it's interesting that, again, that it's soldiers that's been in the field for a long time. You have a standard las rifle. You have something akin to a sawn-off las rifle, so that looks very interesting. You have a singular knife on its own. You have a nice series of heads here, and again, you have a comms pack here. So it's, I suppose, given that you're probably trying to coordinate planet-wide, that's probably why the comm system, or the Vox system as they call it, is so big. But it's despite the fact that it's kind of 38,000 years in the future, but nevertheless it's kind of iconic as well, and it looks cool in the model aspects. So you have another multitude of heads here. So in fairness, you actually get a serious amount of heads with very expressive faces here going all the way across. So it's a great way to kind of really individualize your guard units, including here the Scrimnet one, which is one model I definitely do want to use, because you appreciate a Scrimnet. You have all the other little bits and pieces here, so there's nothing that immediately jumps out to me, because you see we're seeing a repetition of things like flamer fuel, the flamer, but nevertheless a very interesting. One last little thing here, of course, you have the shovel, so an entrenchment tool. So it's good to see little bits and pieces like that. This is the other part of the ordnance. So as you can see, it has the traditional cannon. You have ammo packs. You have the two halves of the las gun version. You have the shield. You have another part of the shield. I presume you have the loader team here. So as you can see, you have different things like mortars. You have the body of the actual weapon here. And you have, of course, great detail on the actual spotter. So I presume this guy is the actual field spotter, given that he has a binoculars case. And just very interesting things here, that this guy is probably, given that thing here, he's probably seating on top of the actual cannon and spinning the wheels to kind of aim it properly. And the heads, of course, are here, and another two kind of scrim netting type of thing. What I like about this is that it gives you the option, if you wanted to kind of put your Cadians in a snow setting, because some people like to make Arctic battlefields, that would kind of really help with it, instead of just a poor kind of bare frozen face. So that was the other ordnance team, and this, I presume, is a similar sprue. So what they do is they do double up on the old sprues, but they give you kind of build options. So yeah, this is largely the same sprue that we've had the last time, but again, it's a good thing, because if you want, say, fellas in unison with their helmets, if you wanted a second op team, or even a dead one, or plenty of heads here. In fairness, you know, they give you a great selection of them, and yep, it's pretty much the same sprue as we've seen before. So what I'll do is I'll put that away, and we'll have a look at the novel, or the Codex itself. Now, there's one thing in this that I'm really I'd nearly be very tempted to skip straight to, because there is a beloved character in the Warhammer 40k universe called Yarrick. He's a bit silly. He's a commissar that got into a fight with an orc that was about 3 times his size, but managed to kill it, but was very badly wounded in the midst of it. So he basically lost his arm, and what he did was he replaced his arm with the robotic arm from the orc, which, you know, I mean, if you're 8 years old, it's really cool. If you're a grown adult and you're looking at this guy carrying an arm that's 3 times the size of him, it seems a bit silly. But nevertheless, Yarrick is a beloved character, because he was introduced at a time when we were all 8 years old, and this was the coolest thing in the world. But what worries me is that there's rumors about his fate, that alas, poor Yarrick, he has died. So this is the Codex. So of course this is going to be a treat, because it's an introduction to the lore of the Imperial Guard. And one thing I want to zoom in here is, one of the things you can see here is that there's great variety to the Imperial Guard. So these are some of the mounted units. You have here some things called Ogrins, which are kind of basically ogre-style humans for the future. You have something here which I think is called the Rogel Dorn tank, which is something I am looking forward to getting later out. And you have a big range refresh. And of course, there is a new general, which I believe is female. So it's a nice shake-up and modernization of the actual guard. So I'm just going to zoom out again, because what's interesting about this book is it will tell us about, I'm hoping, all of them, or if not all of them, at least most of them. So you have basically the huge, a large part of it is just going to be lore. So yep, they're commonly known as the Hammer of the Emperor, because whilst they're big and unwieldy, they bear the brunt of most of the fighting. And you can even see here that there's a mixture of units. You've got some what look like Steel Legion, along with some of the I can't think of them, but they're very kind of Peninsular War type of units. You have here, of course, the leader of the Imperial Guard. You have the State of the Universe. You have the Fall of Cadia. So this is the planet I was talking about. And Ursula J. Creed, who, of course, must be the leader of the remainder of the Imperial Guard regiments from Cadia. But this is, of course, the core of the box set, that the Cadians, those are left, are not going to shirk their duty to the Emperor. You have the Era Indomitus, which is the latest version of Warhammer. So they're in what's called 9th edition. There's been 9 revisions of the game, and they move the story on every time. So this is just basically what's happened to the Imperial Guard during that edition. You have the Chain of Command. You have Combined Arms Regiments. So this is interesting because this will allow you to use different types of the Imperial Guard together. So this is your classic Cadian soldier. This is a Mordian soldier. So they're very prim and proper and kind of glamour of war type of thing. You have the Catachans here, and you have, of course, these guys called prefects, which I haven't seen or know that much about. The Catachan, however, are known as the Jungle Fighters, so they're very good, like Death World regiments. So there's a nice bit of lore here, and of course you get again the information on the Catachan. You have the Mechanized Infantry regiments, so the Talaran, of course, would be kind of like, say, Desert Rangers, and you have of course, these guys, which I can't think of their name, the Rough Rider regiments, which are kind of based on Attila the Hun, or the kind of the Mongol horde. I know it seems silly that you're going into war on horseback in the 40,000th millennium, but nevertheless, it's something that's cool, and it will still impress every 8-year-old, every man that still has some semblance of his 8-year-old boy inside him. You have, of course, the Ordnance, and these guys are among my favorites. These are called the Krieg. Very kind of World War I based mixture of French and German regiments. But basically, I got the Kill Team box set, and I had a fantastic time painting these guys up. They're a very fatalistic army, but I love the whole World War I vibe of them. So it's something that I'm looking forward to, actually fielding a section or a platoon of Krieg along with my normal Cadian units. You have the Warzone Sabbat Worlds. So Colonel Commissar Gaunt. There are books about the Imperial Guard, and among the best would be by a man called Dan Abnett, a fantastic writer. He's also a man who has written for fantastic British establishment, things like 2000 AD. But he is the person who's writing about the entire Sabbat Worlds crusade, and one of his most popular characters is Colonel Commissar Gaunt. You can pick up the omnibuses of the books for a very good price these days. I think the first one's called The Founding, but if you like what you read here, I would strongly suggest you pick up the book on this character and the regiment that he leads, called the Tanith First and Only. I especially like it because it has a very kind of Celtic vibe to it. There's a very huge influence of Scottish and Irish and other kind of Celtic influences in these units. So it's just, sorry, I'm just fanboying here a little bit, but this is something that's really cool. You have the basic infantry regiments and some of the old classic art styles. You have the armoured regiments, which of course is the backbone of the guard, aside from the normal infantrymen. You have Scions of the Storm, which would be kind of more futuristic guard units. They'd be slightly better equipped, I believe. They'd be kind of the paratroopers. You have Warzone Armageddon, which is something that'd be worth reading about, I believe, because one of the great things about the Warhammer hobby is that they update the story, and there's a lot of speculation that Warzone Armageddon, that there's something big that's going to happen on this world. Armageddon, of course, is a famous world because it's, of course, the world where Commissar Yarrick, who I was talking about earlier, is from, but also it's apparently the homeworld for the orcs. and the orcs don't like the fact that the humans have it. So it's a very interesting kind of thing. And yes, of course, this is what I was worried about. The glory of Yarrick. So as we can see here, he has moved on from us. I will probably need a glass of whiskey when I sit down to read this, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to bode well for our dear beloved Commissary Yarrick. We have here colours of Conquest. So as you can see, it kind of gives you different ideas. Like, so you have a shock trooper here. So you have, it's completely up to you what way you want to paint these, you know, and it always will be. And that's one of the best things about the hobby. But as you can see here, there's different kind of styles which will, you know, allow you to paint how you want. I had toyed with the idea of making these akin to Irish army soldiers, but I don't know if my painting skills are up to the task. Nevertheless, it's a temptation that I might try with one. You have here some of the, just basically the pictures of the ordnance, the different types of ordnance and field artillery that you can have. You have here, oh yes, these are the battle winners for the Guard, the tanks. So this is the new one, the Rogel Dorn battle tank, and apparently this thing is huge. It's kind of, it has a very kind of World War II Sherman-esque aspect, because it doesn't have it here, but there was a build where there was a guy basically holding onto what looked like a 50 cal, standing and firing it. As you can see, it's also adorned with a ludicrous amount of ordnance. That you have weapons here at the side, you have weapons here in the front, you have a mortar here, you have a twin-barreled weapon here, as well as, of course, the option to put the 50 cal on the top of it, which, when I get this, I will be doing so. You have other interesting aspects. You have what look like to be the Carskin here, so these would be the kind of the special forces of them. You have them breaching a kind of an Imperial gate here, so this is probably something from Forge World that looks really cool. You have other aspects, so these are the Rough Riders, so the kind of the Attila the Hun lads. So as you can see, like I said, it's a bit mad looking that you have horses in the middle of a battlefield, that basically this guy has a spear with a grenade attached to it. It seems absolutely ludicrous, but you know what? I'll probably pick them up because it'd be just too much fun to not cavalry charge anything crazy. You have some more beautiful imagery here. This is the Lord Solar Leontus. So there was a lot of hullabaloo about him in the sense that he looks more fantasy based than kind of Warhammer based, but nevertheless pretty interesting. You have here the new leader of the Imperial Guard. So there's a lot of really cool things here. These would be the kind of the mobile cavalry lads, so it does give you some information and background on them, and some of the iconography that you can attach, including some of the Ogrins, or Bulgrins I believe they're called. You have here some beautiful pictures here again of the Imperial Guard facing off Tyranids. So they're basically aliens. They're not quite nice. Of course, here we have the rules. So you have the Battle Forge data sheets, the combat patrol, detachment abilities, regimental doctrines. Now, I won't go into so much detail on these because this is something I'll have to learn a little bit myself. But if you're someone who is very au fait with these games, I'm sure that you'll get an idea of what's here. I think we covered most of these anyway with the actual cards. So the card set that we have there that I went through would list most of everything that was here. So you have, of course, the Psychana Discipline, which is the psychic aspect. Tank Aces, which is interesting, because I presume you can kind of, individualize some of your armor regiments. You have Warlord traits, Militarum Tempest Warlord traits, so you can kind of push forward your army a little bit better. And you can relics, which is an interesting thing because you can give certain characters or units in your army relics. It costs you a little bit of what's called command points, but it will allow you to kind of make them just that little bit more powerful or better in a certain way, be it in terms of hitting things, be it in terms of surviving a hit, or be it in terms of movement or anything like that. You have, again, more army rules, so there's quite a lot to it. You have the data sheets, which would kind of come into, you have the regimental orders, perfectus orders. We did come across some of these. And we have here the data sheet. So there's Lord Solar Leontus, which again looks like a fantasy figure, but nevertheless a cool thing to lead your army, I would presume. You have Ursula Creed, who would be the leader of the Cadians. You have the Cadian Castellan, which would be kind of a high-ranking general. So I'll just zoom in on him so we can see that it's very interesting detail here on them. So there will be a lot of data sheets, so I won't kind of spoil everything for everyone, but you have the tank commander, you have the platoon squad, you have certain characters, so you have Iron Hand Strachan, which as you can see is basically a fellow who's missing half himself, but he still has a metallic hand. You have a Cadian command squad, you have a Primaris Psyker. Now that's interesting. Primaris. No, there doesn't seem to be anything here about him being attached to the Space Marines, but Primaris is generally a word that you would associate with the Space Marines. So strange that he was called a Primaris. You have Gaunt's Ghosts, which I actually have. I have these guys myself because I was such a fan of the books. So you have Gaunt's Ghosts here and their latest details. You have regimental attaches and bodyguards. So you have Master of Ordnance, Officer of the Fleet, the Astropath, the Ogren Bodyguard, which is interesting, and a famous Ogren himself, Nork Dedog. You go into the Infantry Squad, the Cadian Shock Troops, the Death Corps Krieg, which of course I've already outlined, are fairly beloved because I love the aesthetic. You have the Cadia Jungle Fighters, so if you wanted the Vietnam War vibe, and you have Sly Marbo, which is basically the Sylvester Stallone of the Warhammer universe. So if you kind of mixed Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and took the characters of Commando and Rambo and squashed them together, you get Sly Marbo. It's a bit of a joke, but you know something, like Yarrick, he's just beloved because even though he was so absurdly powerful, you just can't help but like him. So that's the new model of Sly Marbo, of course. You have the Carskin, which you currently get in the Kill Team box set. You have the Regimental Preacher, the Sergeant Harker, Regimental Engineer, Munitorium Servitors, the Commissar, which is a new interesting one as well. He's a very kind of greatcoat kind of faced Commissar. He is included in this box set. But normally they're very OTT. They'd be very kind of I don't like saying the word, but they'd be very Soviet kind of looking with their outsized hats and kind of huge greatcoats. But this one is a bit more kind of practical in the sense that he has an actual coat that's built for the weather rather than kind of bling. You have here the Ogrins, which are kind of, they'd be the backbone of, well, not the backbone, but they'd be the heavy hitters of the guard. They're just kind of basically ogres, but they're human enough and useful enough that they're kind of considered humans. The Bulgrins, which would be the armored versions. The Rattlings, which are, it's interesting that they still include the Rattlings because basically they're excellent scout sniper type of things, but again, they're barely human. They're useful, but they're not, they be tolerated as opposed to loved. You have the Attilan Rough Riders, of course, so Attila the Hun leading a charge. You have the Scout Sentinels and the Armored Sentinels. So again, you have one of these in the box. You have the Hellhound, so these would be the larger ordnance, and the Rogel Dorn Battle Tank, which is something that's coming out, will be very interesting to see. You have the Heavy Weapons Squad, so like the FSG unit, things like that. You have the Field Ordnance Battery and the Lehman Russ Battle Tanks, which are, were I'd say the most common tank in the world, or in the universe, in the 40k universe. You have the Basilisk, which is a kind of a large field artillery piece. You have the Hydra, which is kind of like an anti-air piece, but I think they use it to attack the ground as well. You have the Manticore, something similar to, I suppose, the HIMARS today, in that it launches missiles. You have the Wyvern, something akin, just something slightly different to it. You have the Death Strike. You have the Chimera. You have the Taurox and the Valkyrie. Now, the Valkyrie is something I would like to get at some stage because it's just a cool looking ship. It's very Aliens kind of vibe from the Aliens dropships. No doubt what it was inspired by, but it's just a cool looking model that I'd love to have. You have the Aegis Defense Line. So as you can see here, you have actual terrain that you can use to assist your army. You have the Baneblade, which is the most over-the-top tank you could ever hope for. I mean, if you put a gun on a gun on a gun on a gun on a gun and put a tank somewhere down at the bottom of it, this is what you'd get. The Baneblade is just a completely over-the-top, silly tank, but nevertheless highly feared because no matter what way you look at it, there's about 20 guns pointing at you. You have the Bane Hammer, you have the Bane Sword, so I mean it does cover every little aspect of it. You have the Doom Hammer, the Hell Hammer, the Storm Sword, and the Militarum Tempest Command Squad, so these guys would be the cavalry lads. You have the Tempest Scions and the Taurox Prime, so again, it does touches on different aspects of the guards. You have crusade rules. Now this is interesting. So I presume if you want to go forward and conquer different aspects, because they're investing a little bit more with kind of attacking other planets. So there's interesting things, especially with Kill Team, that you're assaulting space hulks or assaulting kind of ships, maybe taking control of the skies before you take control of the planet. So it's interesting again that the crusade rules are kind of expanding. You have tours of duty, you have campaign medals, you have agendas, requisitions, crusade relics. So interesting stuff here that you can kind of add to your army. You have an Astra Militarum generator, so if you wanted to actually name your troops, you have a cool little thing here actually, because you have Cadia names, Catachan names, Krieg names, Talar names, Valhallan names, Vostrian names, and tank names. So it's just something to help you kind of get the vibe going. You have Crusade armies, you have war gear points and references, weapon profiles, and you have points values for different things, and of course finally the reference guide here at the back. So yep, that was everything. Now also, I didn't show it on camera, but it also comes with the actual the code. So if you wanted to get the digital version of this for the actual app, you can, which is actually something that's very handy, especially if you have the app when you're on the tabletop game, because it allows you to kind of correctly make your army and correctly look up your pieces without kind of using the book all the time if you wanted to keep this in good condition. So the last thing, of course, is the instruction book. So we won't go through this too much because it's, well, basically it's kind of self-explanatory. It'll show you some of the different options. So of course you have 3 different build options here. Same thing here, that depending on what you want to kind of do. It's focusing, of course, mainly on the guard. It does seem a bit bitty, but it's not the push fit type of models. So it does also come with interesting little bits of terrain. So something here, which is just basically a pillar, just kind of extra decor. So if you wanted to kind of to color your bases a little bit and make them a little bit more interesting, it gives you those options. You have several pages of it, so you have different kind of variations and models of the guard, so you can kind of shake them up and not feel like you're making the same parade standard model over and over and over again. It also shows you here how to make the ordnance teams. It also shows you here how to just the different variations of the ordnance teams and the actual loaders themselves, including the spotter. And you have the Scout Sentinel and the Armored Sentinel. So of course you only have one of them, but you do have the choice as to which one you want to make. So that comes into a lot of kind of variations here, but this of course should be the complete set that you have at the end of it. Now it was, to me, given that Warhammer is always expensive, I thought this was actually an exceptionally good value set, because normally you would buy the Combat Patrol and you'd get the bits and pieces for the Combat Patrol, but you wouldn't get the Codex or what else you could do with the Guard, or you wouldn't kind of get the story or the history or the lore behind it. What this is basically a limited edition starter kit, but a perfect starter kit, especially for someone like myself who wants to start with the Guard for the first time, because I have everything I need to start here. So I have kind of a fighting force, I have the story of the fighting force, I have, if I enjoy it so much that I want to expand a little bit more on it, that I can do so, and it also kind of gives me very practical things to play with, such as the actual data cards. And I know that they're archaic for some people, but for me, especially as I'm getting older and kind of more feeble-minded, I like having my little reminders in front of me when I'm playing the game. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was the Cadia Stands box set, a first-rate box set that I think is a very limited edition. So if you do see one, I would suggest snag it. But even if you don't get it, worry not, because of course these models will be out in a different guise or in a different shape, or possibly even in a newer, different kind of start collecting box set. But nevertheless, this is something that I was delighted to get, because it's it's a Christmas present from my family. So they basically asked me what I wanted. I kind of said this, so they gave me the cash and I went out and I got it. And so thank you, honey. Thank you, my extended family. And I'm going to go off now and enjoy my early Christmas present early. So, until next time, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll. If you enjoyed these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless, and stay safe.